One of our favorites now on the ESPN hotline, a guy that bleeds green for the New York Jets, does a great job covering that team, the greater NFL, ESPN New York, the Jake Asman Show, also contributing lately Mad Dog Sports Radio and ESPN Radio on the national level. Jake Asman joins us now on the ESPN hotline. Jake, my friend, welcome back. Opening day of baseball tomorrow, a lot going on in the tournament. How is the bracket looking for you, by the way?
It's still alive, Bert. Thanks for having me on the show. So I did radio in Houston for 5 years, so I got to watch Kelvin Sampson and the University of Houston Cougars kind of be on this rise the last several seasons. So they were my pick to win the whole thing. A little nervous, not going to lie, in that overtime game against Texas A&M last week. But bracket's still intact. I still got my Final Four left, and I'm hoping the Cougs can cut down the nets because I have a good chance to win my pool if that happens. Hey,
it's looking good on that front. Relatively chalky, but all sorts of intrigue, including Oakland, interesting hairlines, and all sorts of great stuff going on. NC State with a guy that looks like he could be a nose tackle, dominating the middle of the court as well. We're looking forward to talking about the tournament moving forward, but let's talk some football, man. I got to get an honest pulse from you on the New York Jets. I'm feeling pretty good about what they've done this offseason. How are you feeling?
I feel pretty good as well. Now, after what happened last year, I'm never going to go out there and say, I ever feel great when, I was as confident, excited as I ever was, to watch the Jets. And, the season effectively ended, as everyone knows, after 4 plays. But I like what they've done. They entered this offseason needing 3 starters on the offensive line and a number 2 wide receiver. Well, they've been able to go out there, and they were able to add 3 quality starters to their offensive line. Sure, there's some injury risk with Tyron Smith, but you rather overpay for a guy that when he's out there, he's elite. And I don't even think they overpaid with only $6.5 million guaranteed.
Yep.
And his contract is basically based on playing time for incentives. So, if he could play 13 games like he did last year, you sign up for that now, and then you could piece together the other 4 with maybe a draft pick or some of the in-house depth they already have. Getting Morgan Moses for a 6th-round pick, that's a great trade, getting a really good starting right tackle. And even signing a guy like John Simpson to play left guard, he's an upgrade over what they had in Laken Tomlinson. So I think they clearly improved on the offensive line. They signed Mike Williams to complement Garrett Wilson. And look, Mike Williams only played 3 games last year with the ACL, but they don't need him to be great. They just need him to be better than Alan Lazard and the other stiffs they put out there a season ago. So, if he could go out there and contribute, maybe they add another receiver and free agency in the draft, they're in much better shape offensively. And then, of course, look, if Aaron Rodgers at 40 years old can't play 17 games, you need a legitimate backup quarterback. That was the biggest issue a season ago. And they signed a true pro in Tyrod Taylor. So I think even if you're the most negative Jet fan, it's tough to really sit here and complain about what they've done so far. They've given themselves a lot of flexibility going into this draft next month with that 10th overall pick to do a bunch of different things.
Jake Asman of the Jake Asman Show, ESPN New York, Mad Dog Sports Radio, and more is our guest here, Wednesday edition of Overtime. I know it might not be the popular pick, maybe, but what pickup has moved the needle the most for you? Is it got to be Tyron Smith, or is it Mike Williams? Because I feel like casual fans probably most excited about Williams due to the fact that he plays that exciting position of wide receiver. But when it comes to everyone you've added, is there one player more so than any other that you're most excited about?
I'll tell you what, I actually think it's trading for Morgan Moses, right? This is a guy who's been a really good tackle in this league for a long time, played with the Ravens the last couple of years, but he was on the Jets in 2021. Washington had to cut him in June of that offseason because the COVID year, the cap went down, and he was a cap cut. So the Jets were able to bring him in. He ended up having to basically start all year because Mekhi Becton got hurt in week 1. So he started at tackle for the Jets that season. He was so good that he got an opportunity to start, and the Jets GM, Joe Douglas, has already said he regrets letting him leave. So now you fast forward a couple of years later to get him with 1 year left on his contract, only a $5.5 million cap hit, and you only had to trade a 6th-round pick. I think that kind of set everything up because that allowed them to make other moves and maintain that cap flexibility because they got a really good right tackle for only $5.5 million on the cap and a 6th-round pick. So that to me was the best move from like a value standpoint. And as a Jets fan, we know he's good. Like we watched him here, and it was a mistake to let him go. So to get him back, that move really fired me up the most so far.
New York Jets making a lot of moves, particularly on that offensive line. Pretty darn important to keep Aaron Rodgers healthy moving forward. I feel like the division might be ripe for the picking with Buffalo and Miami maybe taking a step back. How are you feeling about the division? And from your perspective, Jake, who should fans be more worried about, Buffalo or Miami in 2024?
It's a great question, Bert, because I agree with you. I think if anything, you can't say the Bills and Dolphins got better. If anything, they got worse. Now, look, you give them respect. They were playoff teams a year ago, of course. But, to me, it's the Bills because they still have Josh Allen. I know Tua had a really good statistical season, but the Miami Dolphins were a little fraudulent last year if you think about it. They were 1-5 against teams with a winning record. They got boat raced in the playoff game against the Kansas City Chiefs. I just don't truly believe in them just yet. I look at the Bills, and as long as they have Josh Allen, they're going to have a chance. I mean, he's an MVP-level quarterback every single season. And, look, the one thing you could say for the Jets is even with Zach Wilson the last 2 years, they have actually beaten the Bills in the regular season. Like, they play them well. So if the Jets could figure out how to, beat Miami one of the 2 times, beat Buffalo one of the 2 times they play, and sweep New England 4-2 in the division and take care of some of the other games on the schedule, you should be right there competing for the AFC East next year. Like, if anything, the Jets won 7 games with a historically bad offense a season ago. It's not crazy to think if Aaron Rodgers, let's say, plays 15 of 17 games next year and Tyrod Taylor plays the other 2, the Jets can go from 7-10 to 10-7, 11-6, and that might be enough to win that division. So I think the Jets are right there, but I think Buffalo's still the team to beat because they have the best quarterback in the division, Josh Allen.
Agree with that 100%. When it comes to keys internally for a playoff berth, obviously health is the big key. But what needs to get better foundationally for the Jets? Because obviously in the past, the defense has been great over the past couple years at times. The running game has been okay at times when Breece Hall is out there. What else needs to click outside of the team just being healthy, which is an obvious factor for every NFL team?
Yeah, no doubt. And, of course, especially more maybe for the Jets than any other team in the league health-wise. But, I think this is a huge year for Robert Saleh, the head coach. I've defended him at times, but the best thing I could say about Robert Saleh through 3 years as a coach is that it's incomplete. He's done a really good job defensively hiring a great staff, and the player development on that side of the ball is excellent. But now, there's really no excuses for this head coach. He's got his quarterback and Rodgers back. They got a quality backup in Tyrod Taylor. He's 4 years in. It's time to win. Very, very rarely do you see coaches with 3 straight losing seasons get a 4th year. So, I have questions about this head coach. Can this team come out and be ready to play more often? There's too many times, and I get it. The offense was terrible last year, so I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth, but there was too many games where it just felt like the Jets were flat, or they came out too slow, or they were too late to adjust. Like they were really good adjusting post halftime. At times, it felt like they needed to adjust in the first quarter and make an obvious adjustment. There were too many games where they waited way too long to realize you have the best cornerback in the NFL, and Sauce Gardner put him on the team's best receiver. I think it's things like that. I think it's this coaching staff led by the head coach coaching with more urgency, and they also led the NFL in penalties a season ago. That can't happen, right? You got to be a more disciplined team. I think that falls on the head coach. So my biggest question besides health is this head coach the real deal now that he's got his quarterback back? Can they take that step with him leading the way?
Certainly an interesting season ahead for the New York Jets in 2024. Jake Asman of the Jake Asman Show, ESPN New York, and many other places these days, at Jake Asman on Twitter. You can't pick the New York Jets, but if you had to pinpoint 1 or 2 NFL teams that you're the biggest fan of what they've done, in other words, most improved NFL teams in free agency, where do you go there?
Ooh, I'm gonna go with the Texans. I love what they've done so far this offseason. I think they improved with Danielle Hunter over Jonathan Grenard, who's a good player, but I think I understand why Nick Caserio decided to let him go, and they pivoted to Danielle Hunter. And I think adding Joe Mixon was a really good move as well. I mean, a 7th-round pick, and you got a significant upgrade in your running back room. And it's not like Devin Singletary, their previous back, was bad last season, but I think Joe Mixon had a new development to that offense to really complement the star quarterback they already have in place with C.J. Stroud. And I like some of the shrewd defensive signings they have made as well. I already mentioned Danielle Hunter, but they signed a couple defensive linemen. They added a couple corners. I think the Texans have had a really nice offseason, and they're kind of stockpiling picks here. So, it's a loaded draft, and because they don't need a tackle, I think they're in a pretty good, or a quarterback, I think they're in a pretty good spot now after they made the trade back with Minnesota to get some really good players at positions of need on day 2 of this draft. So I think Nick Caserio has had a very nice offseason so far.
Jake Asman of the Jake Asman Show, our guest here, Wednesday edition of Overtime. Before we let you go, I got a tough assignment for you. Mocking the top 5 of the NFL draft. You can make some trades. We can walk through it together. But is it Caleb Williams at 1? Who goes 2 to D.C., or do they trade that pick? We'll start there.
Yeah, I think Caleb goes 1. And I do think D.C. takes a quarterback. I think they're going to go Jaden Daniels at 2. 3, I still truly believe New England's going quarterback, so I'll put Drake May there.
Okay.
But, man, you start to wonder, all right, J.J. McCarthy, is the smoke real? Could he actually leapfrog one of these guys and get into the top 3? It feels like, just based on the betting odds, it would be Drake May if that were to happen. But for now, my top 3 is still quarterback. And, look, I think at pick 4, Arizona is desperate to try and move out. They want Minnesota, for example, a team we just mentioned, to come up, and I could see that being a McCarthy spot. So I don't know how we're going to get there exactly or when, but I do see right now quarterbacks going 1, 2, 3, and 4. And despite what Jim Harbaugh has said about building the trenches and the offensive line, I think it's all smoke. I think they're taking Marvin Harrison Jr. at 5 and calling it a day. So that's my top 5 for right now. But as you know, it will probably change over the next couple of days because that's how this goes this time of year.
Yeah, or the next couple hours as well. Jake Asman of The Jake Asman Show. You can find him on Twitter at Jake Asman, ASMAN. Great top-tier coverage for the NFL, pinpointed on those New York Jets, who I'm just about ready to crown division champs, and we're not even in the middle of the offseason just quite yet. Jake, always appreciate the time, my friend. We'll do it again here soon. Best of luck in the draft. If we don't talk to you before then, to your Jets at pick 10.
Bert, appreciate you, my man, and let's hope this Jet season is a lot better than the previous one, so we have some happier conversations in the fall.